Welcome to Who Are You, a CSI podcast. I am Lauren, and I've seen CSI through and through around 3 to 4 times.
And I'm Nick. This is my first time experiencing these episodes.
And today we are reviewing Season 2, Episode 5, Scuba Doobie Doo. Original air date, October 25th, 2001. Director is Jeffrey Levy. Writers are Anthony E. Zeiker, Andrew Lipsitz, and Elizabeth Devine. And we start off the episode with shots of the Vegas Strip before we go to an apartment complex. So, Nick, what is our Vegas score for this episode?
The initial shots is pretty small.
Yeah.
But we have some additional shots later on in the episode.
Yep.
So all told, we end up at a 28 out of a possible 55 LV score.
Okay. All right.
So it's not.
I feel like we've been in the 20s a few times. Like we're kind of hovering around.
Yeah, I thought this was low. I didn't include the apartment building shot, the sort of pan down because it wasn't. There's nothing uniquely Vegas about that. That easily could have been filmed in California.
Oh, 100%.
Into that, but then I was surprised. There was like a two-scener for like 6 episodes, and then right towards the end, there's another like one scene, a few seconds.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think anywhere in the 20-30 range is a great place to be for like a Las Vegas score. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to. The closer you get to like the top of the range, the more the episode better be about gambling, or the strip itself, or you know what I mean? Like, so, something super Las Vegas-y, which we'll see. I do want to say, since we're at the start of the episode,
yes,
this might be my favorite name for an episode ever.
Fair.
Really do. And I think and maybe we could talk about it. We should talk about it at the end because I feel like there's 2 parts to this title, and it made me think it was super clever.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Let's loop back around to that for sure. So we go to this apartment complex. We go inside of the apartment complex. A manager is showing the apartment. He's telling the couple that he's showing the apartment to that he hasn't looked at this apartment since the last people moved out. And shock and amazement, when they open the door, they find an apartment just covered in blood. Just blood splatter everywhere. So the woman is like, we need to call 911 ASAP.
Yeah, I'm on rewatch. I was like watching the scene again. I was like, wait, I mean, you've been fighting with this tenant.
Yes.
You don't have a high opinion of them. Why would you ever show this apartment to somebody without looking at it? Also, it's literally next door to your house.
Yeah, you are one door over. Like, how hard is it to go one door over when you have the key to the place?
You could have checked on it at any point. But I also was like, well, spoiler alert.
Oh man, this is an early spoiler alert. I like it.
Spoiler alert. I wouldn't call 911 if I was his building manager.
No, the woman says to call 911.
Doesn't matter. The guy could just be like, no, this happens all the time. He lies through his teeth this whole episode. He easily could have made something up. It's like, there's no dead body. You know what I mean? It's like...
But I think, he could have said, let's not, and then had the understanding that she was going to go home and call 911 anyway. Yeah, so it would look better for him to like be like, oh yeah, we need to call 911 versus.
What a great line it would have been if.
And plus, spoiler alert, the blood is not related to him. Like he has nothing to do technically with the blood in the apartment. So he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. They can come and check out the blood splatter because I have nothing to do with it.
But he did have something to hide.
He definitely had something to hide. That is,
you don't necessarily want a lot of police coming around when you're actively maybe trying to hide something.
Yeah,
I do think it would have been a great line if even Brass like had a throw out in the opening scene, being like, "Yeah, people who were looking at this apartment insisted on calling 911."
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
or something like. Then it would just added a layer. There's some good ones here, though. I got to give them credit. Watch through number 2 is fun just to realize how succinct they were in laying down some of the early evidence.
Yes. So Grissom and Jim Brass arrive on the scene. Jim Brass is comparing it to a slaughterhouse because he worked in one as a kid. And they run some tests on the blood on the walls and come to find out it's human.
It's a real COVID-like test, which is...
Yes, it does. It does look like the like at-home COVID tests. We go to credits. Then we return to Sarah, Grissom, and Warwick at the scene in the apartment. Sarah's talking about how the blood splatter looks like high velocity impact, but there's no bullets. Grissom wants her to acquaint herself with the situation, but don't interpret it. Warwick has been spraying the carpet. They dim the lights, and we realize that the carpet is covered in blood, but there are voids left behind from pieces of furniture and what Warwick thinks is an electric saw. I do not see an electric saw in this shadow at all.
Yeah.
The first time I watched it, I'm like, that doesn't look like an electric saw to me. And then I was like, on the second watch through, I'm like, I'm really going to pay attention this time and see if this looks like an electric saw to me. Does not at all look like an electric saw.
I could see how they got there. I had the same feeling in the first walkthrough. I was like, what are you talking about?
I was like, I don't know. I don't get it.
I was like, that would be a tough get for anybody, I think. But obviously you got to tell the audience what you're looking for so that when it comes up later. I was a few weird things in the scene. I think maybe one of them is about to come up, but think how long it would take to spray like an area sprayer to spray that whole room with luminol. And then they're like, and then
they said it only lasts for 30 seconds.
It's like, yeah, we only got 30 seconds left. I was like, well, that's not how this works.
Because like most of it would be gone already by the time you finish spraying it. Unless you had like an industrial sprayer that you could spray the entire carpet all at once. And we then go to our other storyline.
Okay, so the one thing they did say.
Yes.
They talked about how much blood there was.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And like, I think there's a line about like, there's like, oh, there's got to be a dead person is so much. And I immediately was like, you don't know that all this blood is coming from one person.
No, at this stage,
and you don't know if it all came at one time. Which actually turned out to be a pretty good little note on my end.
This is true. Good for you. Yeah. That is a solid assessment.
I actually started to write myself off after a while because I was like, yeah, but they probably have a test, or they probably know that it turns black, or you know what I mean, like a way they would be able to tell. Yeah. So it's like just because they didn't say it doesn't mean they wouldn't have known it. And then, spoiler alert, it does come out over a period of time, and it does. Although it is from one person, but that person is not dead.
No. So we go to the desert. There are fires ablazing. We see helicopters dropping water. We then go to Catherine, Nick, and O'Reilly on the scene. And crazy enough, there's a scuba diver up in a tree.
I paused this episode and wrote down a prediction.
Oh.
That Nick immediately says out loud.
Okay.
I wanted him to be so right the whole episode.
The scoop.
I was like, because they show the before they show that scene, they show the helicopters, scoop, and I went, I bet this guy was scooped up from the lake and dropped on the tree.
Yes. Nick is very adamant. This Nick and the Nick in the show are very adamant that he was picked up by one of these helicopters in their buckets of water as they were in Lake Mead and then dropped to quench the fires. We even see a very short recreation of this.
Team Nick aerial screwdriver.
Yep.
Screwdriver. Although I was like, why is his rubber fin burned like halfway? Like that was like,
right.
Like there's a lot of things in this scene that actually support that not being the case.
Yeah. But that's probably more apparent on the second watch through versus on the first. Yeah.
But I really wanted to be true just because it's such a cool end, but also because I predicted it. And then even though Nick said it right away, and I was like, this probably lowers my chances.
Yeah, because they always introduce this early.
They always have these like cockamamie, person one thinks it's this weird over the top thing.
Yeah.
And they spend the whole episode betting person two whether or not they're right, and it's never that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So we return to the apartment. We're with Jim Brass and Grissom. They're with the apartment manager. He's letting them know that he hasn't seen the girlfriend from that apartment, her name is Allison, in over a month, which is suspicious when there's blood covering the apartment. And Grissom has to admit that at this point in time, the only evidence that they have in this case is the blood. Blood in that apartment is the only evidence that they have at the moment.
The manager's like, this blood will never come out. And Grissom's like, good, it's our only evidence.
Yeah. We're at storyline B. Right? Yeah, I'd say it's storyline B. Catherine and Nick are back at the scene. They're kind of doing some investigation. Nick finds a void. He finds like an area that has green vegetation, which is very strange because everything else around it is completely burnt. Nick also finds a matchbook, and he uses hairspray to not compromise the matchbook, so it doesn't like disintegrate as soon as he picks it up.
Although On the scene where he shoots the matchbook with the hairspray, it like completely disintegrates.
It does. It like
and
bubbles
then,
and just.
and then you get that like the really bad CGI version of it where it's fine.
Yeah, like it's totally okay. Don't worry about it. We're then back with
Oh,
Jim. Oh,
I want to
sorry.
say
Go
that
ahead. Yeah.
the little so that one spot on the
Yes,
ground
with the
that's not burned,
vegetation. Yeah, yeah.
they don't actually call it out at the end of the episode.
No, they never.
But
They never specifically
yeah,
explain it.
but they do kind of show why it's there. And I was like, oh, why didn't they just say that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because I was kind of like, wait, did they ever explain that? And the second watch through, I was like, oh yeah, right, that makes a lot of sense. And I was like, yeah, it's because that's where the body was.
Yes.
And it was, and it is, you're made of lots of water, so like,
right. So
until
you protected
you burned, the ground isn't going to burn.
Yep. Yep. So we then are back with Jim Brass and Grissom at Monaco Receiving. They meet Cliff, who is the other tenant from the bloody apartment. He's telling them that Allison is in Canada visiting her parents. No big deal. He then admits that the blood on the wall is his blood. It's from his nosebleeds because he has hepatitis C and he has blood to spare, and it was his way of getting back at the apartment manager. Grissom thinks he's lying.
So gross, by the way. Just
so gross. So gross. But Grissom thinks he's lying based on the blood pattern because it's like a V pattern, and that doesn't make sense. But spoiler alert will be shortly explained. And we also learned that his current abode, Cliff's current abode, is a shipping container, basically, or a truck. He doesn't have another apartment at this stage. And he agrees to let them take his property to the lab for further testing. Because as they're like looking in, they see the electric saw, and then they also see a lamp that has like a tiny little spot of blood on it, which comes up later, folks.
Yeah. Which is like also one of the weirdest things in this whole episode.
It's
the blood on the lamp.
Yeah, it's strange. So we see a bunch of CSIs bringing the property into the CSI lab. Warwick and Sarah are testing the tools, but there's no blood. They're finding no blood on any of the tools that they pulled from the storage unit. We have this nice little like music overlay as they like test the tools to see if they can like recreate the pattern found on the wall. And then we go to Greg Sanders with Grissom, and Greg Sanders gives Grissom results. Grissom doesn't believe the results. We're not told at this stage what the results are, just that Grissom is having a very hard time believing these results. This transitions us to a Grissom and Jim Brass walk and talk, and we learn that all of the blood that they sampled from the walls is in fact Cliff's blood. It matches Cliff.
Yeah, there's like 16 samples. It was like a big number.
Yes, and all of it matches Cliff.
Which is important for my subplot, which is how mean everyone in this episode is to Greg Sanders.
So mean to Greg Sanders in this episode. And not like, why? What did Greg Sanders do wrong? He's just trying to be helpful. He's just trying to do his job. Poor guy is like legitimately just trying to do his job.
He's always caught in the middle.
Yeah. This brings us to Grissom and Jim Brass with Cliff. He admits in the interrogation room that it took about a month to populate all the blood splatter that was found on the wall. And this is where Cliff does a demonstration, which thankfully they don't show, but even the noise is unnerving.
Yeah. To be fair, he offered to show them much earlier on.
He did. When they saw him at receiving, he was like, I'll give you a demonstration. Like, I'll show you how I did it. And they were like, no. And then in interrogation, they're like, yeah, we're in an enclosed space. This is a much better spot for you to show us how you...
I like Grissom gets super close, and he's like, you might want to back up.
Like, you might want to back up.
He doesn't back up, by the way.
No, he does not. We're then... Oh, this brings us to Warwick, Sarah, and Grissom, and they're looking at the blood pattern results, and they realize that what is on the wall does match the samples that Cliff gave in the interrogation room.
One of my first notes, and then people create scenes for shows. They aren't necessarily, they're just following the instructions.
Yes.
But I wrote these blood patterns are so weird. But actually, I think they did a pretty good job of what it would probably actually look like.
Yeah, I think so.
They over dramatize this one splatter that they're showing in the scene. Yes. And the walls are a lot more muted, but it's kind of I feel like random, weird, it's exactly what you would expect as gross as it is. But yeah, there was one note from early on, like, why are these blood patterns so weird?
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of Greg Sanders, he enters. The blood sample from the lamp, is not Cliff's, and it is in fact from an unknown female. Bum, bum, bum. Now, Catherine and Nick are with Doc Robbins. This is where we learn that their victim did not die in a fire. He died due to cardiac concussion. He basically short-circuited. Something hit his chest and messed with the rhythm of his heart and killed him.
Yeah, they mentioned this. He mentioned minor league baseball.
Yes, getting hit with a baseball to the chest, like a line drive to the chest.
And I don't know how often this happens with adults, but I know that this is a real problem in youth sports for baseball. Okay. And it's not like this astronomically high number, but like enough. I think there's like more than one every year on average or something.
Oh, geez, that's scary.
And younger children are more susceptible because the bones in their chest are still turning from cartilage to solidified bones until you're a full adult.
Yeah.
So that you can kind of like grow into your final form, if you would. And so as a result, they don't absorb the impact as well, and they could transfer more easily. And that's like one of the things where like having there's a whole campaign to have AEDs like in all youth sports, because this is the kind of thing that can happen. It can happen in other sports too, but it's almost infamous in baseball with the line drive.
Yeah.
Just a square in the chest. And it all comes down to timing. It's like this 0.002 of a second every heartbeat where this could happen to you or something.
Yeah.
But even if, enough kids get a line drive in baseball, it's bound to happen eventually.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. We also learn that the victim soaped up but didn't soap off, which comes up again very shortly. Actually, it comes up in the next scene. Greg Sanders walks in with Nick. He's letting Nick know that he finds the case very interesting. And Greg Sanders is the one that points out that a lot of scuba divers use liquid soap to get the suits on because it's a very, very tight fit and it can be very difficult to get them on. So basically you lube yourself up and then you put the suit on. So most likely that's why the victim had this soap residue, was because they were lubing themselves up to get the suit on.
I was a little disappointed they spoiled this so quickly, because I actually knew what this was for.
And you were like, yes, I know the answer to this. Yeah. And then the episode was like, I do too. Here
the episode's like, yeah, well, you don't have to wait. You don't.
Yeah, it's right here, right in the next scene.
I had even written, I was going to write it down, and then like they said it, and I was like, oh, I guess I don't have to write this down. It's not a secret. It's not going to be a whodunit moment.
No, this is not a whodunit moment. They immediately give you the answer. We're then with Sarah and Grissom back at the apartment, and we learn that Allison never arrived at her parents. Like, they never even heard that she was like coming to visit them. So they're like, no, she's not here. I have no idea what's going on. And
if you were her parents, what would you do in this moment?
I mean, freak out.
Call her.
Yes. Yeah. Well, maybe that's how they do end up finding. Spoiler alert, Allison shows up.
I thought for sure they were going to do that. Like when she showed up, I was like, oh, her parents must have called her. She'd be like, yeah, you guys called my parents and told them I might be dead. You know,
like you scared, like you
would have been an awesome scene.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that.
They did not.
That was like one of a few times where I was like, writer Nick from the future really wants to go back.
Yeah, you're like, I could really improve this episode with just like a few little changes. So I had to call out this scene because Sarah's like, oh, okay, yeah, like, we do know that the blood is from his nosebleeds, and we, the patterns match, but maybe he, used this to cover up the blood from murdering Allison. Grissom scratches off one tiny little spot and goes, nope, there's no blood underneath here, so that's not what's going on.
I wanted them to check for bleach, right?
Yeah.
He could have bleached, like, because it could have been, I actually, at this point in time, this was my prevailing theory, was that, oh, what if he murdered his girlfriend and cleaned everything up with bleach? Because they find like traces of blood on the carpet, but the carpet isn't bloody, like with aluminol.
Right.
And I was like, so he may have just washed it up or something. Yeah. Right. But like the walls, maybe he cleaned them with bleach, and then he went around blowing his blood all over it, so that the foreman would have to bleach the walls to get rid of the blood, and therefore destroy the evidence for when they realize his girlfriend has been missing 2 months from now, and he's a prime suspect. There's no evidence left. I actually thought that's where this episode was going.
Nope.
And it
Spoiler
was not.
Alert. It's not where the episode goes.
It was not. But it's good for Cliff. He seems like a nice guy. Cliff, by the way, I thought was going to be a spot the guest star.
I also thought that, and I looked at his IMDb. I was fairly certain I knew him from the X-Files, from like a one-off in the X-Files, and I looked all through his IMDb and I saw no credit for the X-Files. So I was like, all right, I guess I don't know him.
He reminds me of just a lot of guys who are in early 2000s television and movies.
Yes, he must look very similar to the guy that I'm thinking about from the X-Files.
I do have like a mini spot the guest star, but it's not a fair one because I found it accidentally.
Okay. I mean, we can still talk about it.
We'll get there shortly.
Okay.
They're coming up.
So they notice a lot of flies in the room, and then they realize that the flies are regurgitating blood. So like the flies are regurgitating, they're regurgitating blood. And it has to be fresh blood because they don't feast on dry blood. So this has to be like wet blood that these flies are drinking. We then go to Catherine with Greg Sanders. She's asking for her results. And she's a little upset thinking that Grissom put his work before hers. And Greg Sanders is trying to tell her, like, no, that's not what's going on. I'm actually working this case with Nick. Which transfers us to Catherine and Nick, where they call Greg a CSI wannabe.
What? I would think that, I mean, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth or judge anyone's career, but I would think that, like, Greg's job is almost like a more skilled job than a CSI.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's like, yeah, he wants to be more involved, but, like, aren't all the CSI people basically want to be detectives? Like, who are they to, like,
to judge?
Go crazy.
But we also learn in the scene that on the bottom of the tank, there's a fissure, which suggests that there was an explosion. So this comes up a little while later. And I think this is also the scene where they find the serial number on the tank to try to track.
The acid etching.
Yes. Yep. So they do that. That brings us to Catherine and O'Reilly at an apartment. A Jerry Walden answers. He lets them know that he lent Bruce Skeller the tank. And as they're talking to Jerry, Catherine notices that he's missing a coffee table, an Ashwood coffee table. He's claiming he sent it out to be refinished. Catherine thinks there's more to this story than he is letting on at the moment.
So this is my spot the guest star. This gentleman, he was on, of all shows, Dexter, a show known for its blood splatters.
Yeah, that's true.
And I forget who he dated or whatever, but it's like a classic, like, Dexter doesn't like this person in their life anymore moment. But I only know that because I was, like, randomly on IMDb looking up somebody else from a different show. If you're familiar with the show Lucifer.
Yeah, I love Lucifer.
I was watching a podcast that the guy from Lucifer was on, Tom Ellis, and they were mentioning one of the characters in the show, and I didn't know who the actress they were talking about, which character.
Yep.
And then I looked at their person, right?
Yep.
And then they were on Dexter, and I was like, wait. And I was like, oh, yeah, right. And then I was like, wait, hold on. Isn't this guy from the show that I've just watched?
Yeah, like yesterday? Also on Dexter?
Wasn't he also, like, isn't he this other character? But even funnier, I don't know, like 5 seasons from now, she's on CSI.
Oh, funny. Oh, awesome.
So sort of reverse spot the guest starring myself here, where it's like I was scrolling through their IMDb to find this credit and then saw the CSI credit in there. But yeah, he played a character named Elliot on Dexter, like 9 episodes. So not a huge number, but just an arc in one of the seasons.
That's still significant. That's not,
but
that's not nothing.
More fun because it was a blood splatter TV.
Yes.
And this a crime scene solving blood. There's like a lot of, even though that's not his storyline.
No, it's not. No. But speaking of blood splatter, we go to Grissom and Sarah. They're looking at the vent. Manager arrives. They tell him to go talk to Jim Brass. And Grissom then finds a very important beetle because the beetle that he finds feeds on decaying human flesh. So, very important find. The beetle ends up playing a pretty significant role in the
I
episode.
love this. We had this was another episode where he referred to a beetle by the Beatles reference,
Yes.
like a
He wanted
Ringo
to, I
beetle.
think, what episode was that? Yes, he did. I can't remember what episode it was,
So
but
he
he
says
did.
this is Peter or Paul,
Yes.
and she gets the reference right away.
Yes, because it's
Sarah
one
gets
of
the
the most
reference.
important Beatles.
Yeah, it should have been George Harrison, but
Oh, well,
it's okay.
you know. Well, listeners debate. Speaking of the beetle, we go to Warwick and Sarah. They are extracting stomach contents from the beetle without killing it somehow, because the beetle's alive at the end of the episode. So they're somehow able to get the stomach contents out without killing it. I'm impressed.
I hesitate to go down this path.
Oh no. Am I gonna have to cut this?
Maybe. There's this thing that beetles are known for called traumatic insemination.
Okay.
Which basically they pierce through the thorax of the female to mate.
Yep.
She lives just fine, lays eggs, and continues the species. So if there's a creature out there, and I don't know if this beetle does it, I don't want to Google that.
Going to,
but it's one of those things that comes up if you watch enough science videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
But yeah, beetle. Maybe beetles are uniquely designed to be able to survive.
I mean, maybe. We then head on over to Catherine with the district engineer. He's testy.
Did they break up?
I have no idea, but he is like, oh, what are you using me for now? And like, what can I do for you? Because like, that's obviously like, we have a one-way relationship, basically.
I mean, I'm not going to vindicate his feelings, but if, let's say, they were dating for a while, and then she broke it off, and then she lures him out to the desert and insinuates, that she wants to get back together, but or something, then he could be mad. But like, you knew she was using you for her job because she asked you to do something that you wouldn't have done otherwise.
Right. You could have said no. You could have just said no.
Yeah. So, but I could understand why he's angry, but I feel like they just cut out some storyline. Maybe we missed an episode,
that they cut a scene out with him in it.
It's so weird to include him and then not have like even one throwaway. And maybe that's what happened. Maybe there was a throwaway line where she said to Warwick, "Oh, I got an ex-boyfriend I can call. He's probably not going to be happy about it."
Yeah.
And they cut that line. And so then this makes a little more sense. But yeah, I was like, what is the point of him being so angry here?
I don't know. But through him, we do learn about the sale of the land. And we also learn that the victim, Bruce, was an environmentalist and he didn't want to sell. Like he was very opposed to the sale. So it's very strange that last week he, quote unquote, suddenly changed his mind and now was willing to sign on the dotted line and sell this piece of property.
Well, he was down. I mean, that makes sense because they spent all this time talking about how penniless he had become.
Yes.
And so I could understand why it might happen.
Yes. But that's not what happened. We stay with Catherine. She is now talking to Ronnie, our handwriting analysis gentleman. He is saying that if the sales agreement is a forgery, it's a great forgery. He can't testify in court that it's a forgery. But he shows her this fun little contraption that illustrates that they use two separate pens to sign the document.
Yep.
Which I also feel like they never come back to this.
I assumed at the time that meant it was supposed to show that they aren't all buddy like the guy assumed.
Yeah.
It was best friend, like that they each had to sign the document separately.
Yeah, to make it happen.
Yeah. But like based on what happened, like the final flashback for this, I question whether it's supposed to be a forgery and it just ends up being really good.
Oh no, I think it is a forgery.
I wasn't sure. I thought it was legit, but
no, I think it's a forgery.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get there. We're then with Greg Sanders and Grissom. Greg Sanders in Grissom's office. The beetle tested positive for human DNA, so they're going to get a warrant to search apartments because that beetle's got human DNA inside of it.
But they didn't say whether it was like male or female.
No, they just said it was human DNA. It might have been like a sample size that they could determine if it was human or not, but not enough to build an actual like DNA profile on. They don't go into it, but that could be it. I mean, it's only a little beetle. This brings us to Grissom Warwick and Sarah knocking down walls. But as they're doing so, Jim Brass walks in with Allison Scott. She's alive.
Dun, dun, dun,
Girlfriend
dun.
is alive. And she tells them that the blood on the lamp probably is hers because she's stubbed her toe on that lamp countless times. And she's not with Cliff anymore, but he's not a murderer. Like, he's plenty of things. Murderer isn't one of the things that he is.
I think she's a little too certain that the blood in the lamp isn't hers.
No, it's
even
hers.
She hasn't been there. No, but she's too certain.
Oh, okay.
Because she hasn't been there in a month.
I guess she doesn't think that he's capable of attracting another woman.
Yeah, or cleaning up after himself. Because he could just have been. I don't know, but like, it is hers, and it does make sense. But it's just that scene was just a little weird.
Yeah. So this, they walk her out so they get a blood sample so they can run some further tests. Sarah talks about this puzzle of completing a square but not leaving the paper to do so, which gets Grissom to shift to, I have to think outside the box. And they look at the vent, and this brings them to the manager's apartment, which is the apartment next door. So we then move away from the storyline for a bit. We go to Greg Sanders calling over Catherine, and he gets results from, I think, the matchbook, because I think they think that they lit a cigarette, like they smoked a cigarette, and then they put the cigarette like in the matchbook, and that's what started
I think the
fire.
saliva's on the cigarette.
Yes.
Filter
So they got results. Greg Sanders lets her know that he got results from that. Nick and Catherine then are doing further investigation, and there's a nice little matchy-matchy. The Ashwood
classic
splinters
matchy-matchy
from the scuba diver.
I'm glad the guy who was
the coffee table
on a fire, covered with small pieces of kindling, the kindling survived.
Yep. And Catherine supposes that they got into an argument which led the attacker to punch the victim, thus causing the cardiac concussion.
Yep.
And probably accidentally killing him.
Yeah.
Like
was not
they're wrestling.
To murder him.
He threw a punch. He just happened to hit him like with just the right force and at just the right time to cast his cardiac concussion. We are back in the manager's apartment with Grissom and Sarah. The apartment manager is saying, because he has like a bunch of candles out, he's saying because he like let food rot in the fridge, and Jim Brass enters. They have a new warrant because the apartment manager's wife is missing.
You wouldn't mind if I examined your vent, would you?
You don't have to ask his permission. I got a new warrant that covers this apartment. Your wife being missing put it over. Funny you didn't mention that before.
Yeah. So not only was Allison missing, but then not missing, his wife is missing. So new warrant granted. They can start knocking down walls in this apartment. We quickly learn, though, that the vent, like on this side, is like filled with bugs. It's like they do this little like zoom scene.
And there's like a lot
filled with
bugs.
Of
beetles in there.
So they start knocking down walls, and they find a blanket in the wall with blood on it, and some of these like beetles. So not a great sign. We then go to Catherine and Nick. They're entering into the interrogation room where O'Reilly, a lawyer, and Jerry already are. And they're letting Jerry know that he set the fire on purpose.
Yep.
This wasn't an accidental, whoops, desert fire. This was set on purpose.
And he for arson now.
And he did it because he thought the body would burn. Right? Like it would just get like burned up in this fire, and they wouldn't find any evidence of it, and it would all be fine. But
why would you dress him in a scuba suit?
I have no idea. Why didn't isn't it harder? Wouldn't he have to like burn through the suit and then burn through him?
Yeah. That was one of the things I didn't quite understand.
No,
unless he was trying to sell the helicopter story,
right? Which they don't really say.
Which doesn't make sense if he's not in the tree.
Yeah. And they explained that the victim ended up in the tree because compressed air plus too much heat equals kaboom.
Yeah, basically get a rocket out of their tank.
Yes. So that's how the victim ended up in the tree. We return to Warwick, Grissom, and Sarah.
To bring it back home.
Oh, yes. Yes.
He would have been on that little spot, protecting that little bit of grass, before
before he rocketed
venture.
up. Yes, 100%.
Which they don't say, but they should have.
No, great. We're back with Warwick, Grissom, and Sarah. They're still tearing down walls in the apartment manager's apartment. And Warwick finds a hollow section. There's like a bit of excitement, but then come to find out it's an ironing board. Grissom is frustrated. He goes outside. Sarah joins him. He's saying that his pulse is 95, which means that he's like really mad because usually it's 75. So if it's this high, it's because he's getting upset. And then there's a little moment where Sarah wipes some chalk off of Grissom's face before saying like, hey, let's go back in and wash up.
I really wanted her to be like, don't get emotional.
Yeah, chill out, Grissom.
Can't let your emotions interfere with the case.
Rein them in. Grissom tries the faucet. They're back in the apartment. He tries the faucet. There's no hot water.
No.
Which Cliff mentioned very early on in this episode, that one of the gripes that he had with the apartment is that there was no hot water.
He had 3. There were flies.
Yes, there was flies. There was no hot water.
There was a smell.
Yes.
And there was no hot water.
Yes. All 3 end up being explained very soon.
And they're also all true in the manager's apartment.
Yes. Because we follow Grissom, Jim Brass, and the manager down into the basement. This is where Grissom is starting to realize that like a certain container is being bypassed, which is why there's no hot water. It's like not going, the pipes aren't going to the hot water tank. You know, they're not getting to the tank to be heated. Thus, there's like no hot water.
And he says bypass, but like really, they just shut the valves off.
And
they are shut off in the
yeah, because especially the second time watching it, I was like, wait, bypass would mean like you moved them somewhere, like, you know, you routed them somewhere else. You didn't route them somewhere else.
And there might be a bypass. I didn't see a bypass pipe, but like there might be a bypass, and that's what he's done. But it's not like he went down there and welded a new pipe. He just turned some valves.
Yeah, he just turned. So Grissom ends up tapping on one of these tanks, which should be hollow, but it's not hollow. Like, it doesn't sound hollow. They lift the top off of the tank. Dead body of a woman inside.
Lots of flies.
Lots of flies.
I really was torn as to what is, like, when did he move this body?
Because I don't know, because he replastered the wall, right? Like, he had to knock down the wall, put her in the wall, plaster it up, realize that the smell was too bad, take her out of the wall, replaster the wall again, and then bring her down into the basement.
And how long has she been dead? Because we just had a thing about decomposition in closed spaces.
I don't think Jim Brass mentions that. He just mentions when he comes in with a new warrant that his wife is missing.
Yeah.
I don't think he states for what length of time, but you would think it would have to be probably at least 2 months or so ago, because Cliff spent a month aspirating blood on the walls because of these issues, and he had moved out, some time before the apartment manager showed it. So you would think she would have to be dead for at least 2 months, 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, I figured at least a month.
Yeah.
And I was like, first I was like, was she in the wall? And then he moved her because of the police were there. But then I realized that wasn't true on the second watch.
No, I think he probably moved her because of the
hot
smell.
Water. Yeah. Because Cliff mentions the hot water, so it couldn't have been then. So this is just sitting in this like damp bucket. I guess there's supposed to be salt in there. It's like a brine.
Yeah, it's a brine tank.
But she's certainly covered with flies and beetles for a month. Like, I don't know about you, but I've seen some dead things on the side of the road walking my dog.
Not pleasant.
They go fast once there are bugs involved.
Once the bugs are there, generally speaking, they clean it up pretty darn fast.
I thought it was going to be a skeleton when they opened the thing. I really did.
She looks in good shape, all things considered, for how long she's been dead, and she's in like a wet tank. Like, she should look a lot more gruesome than she looks. I think this was network television not wanting
it was easier
to show what this body would actually look like. Yeah. And the apartment manager says, she nagged me.
I thought Grissom was going to deck him.
Yeah, Grissom gives him a look. Grissom is like, she nagged you?
Remember
you
almost
focus on Grissom for a while?
There's that other episode, the roller coaster, where he like almost went after somebody. I I thought we were going to have one of those come back up.
Yeah, we don't get a roller coaster ride. Instead, we get Sarah and Nick inviting Grissom to breakfast. He declines because he's already having food with the beetle. Because the beetle was the one who helped them solve the case. Not his team. Not anybody else. Just the beetle.
Greg.
Just the
Not
beetle
Captain
was the
Brass.
only. Nope. Just the beetle. So
just Paul.
Yep. So that brings us to the end of this episode. And Nick, what did you think about today's episode?
So, despite there being some faults in this episode, overall, I actually thought it was pretty good. I liked it. I didn't really I feel like there's it's not like a home run, but it's, especially after I think the last couple episodes haven't been as good. This one, I was like, okay, we're kind of getting to, this meets the threshold, if you're going to fall in the top half of episodes, right?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
So I was okay with it, and it held up pretty well in the rewatch. There were some positives. I mean, there were some things I was still kind of like, what was up with that?
Yeah.
But I feel like, if they didn't have those, it could have been one of the better episodes of the whole season. So, but I think it was pretty good.
Yeah. So I enjoyed this episode as well. I think it was fun. I feel like I can't remember if it was the last. I don't think it was the last episode. I think it was the episode before that, or maybe it was the last episode. I can't remember that. It was not a fun episode. Oh no, 2 episodes ago, and they were trying to inject humor into the episode, and it really wasn't working. This one had some funny moments. It had some kind of weird moments, some kind of off the wall moments, but they worked and they fit into the context of the show. And I like when they can be a little light and a little funny, but still hold true to the values of the show. So I enjoyed it. I think storyline A holds together much better than the scuba diving one. I think the scuba diving one is kind of brief, and they don't give it the airtime that I think it probably could have had. But I feel like storyline A was very strong and winding, right? Very oh, you think this, and then now you think this, and then you come over here. So yeah, I think this is a decent episode. I think CSI is starting to find itself. I think this is a good example of CSI starting to find itself and be a little bit more comfortable in what type of show it is, which is very exciting to me.
I have to talk a little bit about the title, because I teased it earlier.
You did. Yes, let's talk the title.
So obviously Scuba Doobie Doo. Scuba, we get the scuba diver.
Yes.
But there is some real Scooby Doo to this. Figuring out
it was the apartment manager all along.
Or more importantly, I would have got away with it if it weren't for those meddling CSIs, right? It was nothing. It all started nothing to do with him. They just kept digging. They just tripped their way into finding this out. But also just the way that they're doing stuff, as a team together, Sarah, Warwick, and Grissom. It had that sort of Scooby Doo mentality.
Yes, energy to it. I agree. I wouldn't have thought that, but now that you mention it, I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah. So especially when they were starting to knock down walls and stuff, they're they're making jokes and they're telling each other clues. It's just that's kind of the way the Scooby Doo episode is, right? You're just yeah, but what if he hit the body in the different wall, right? You got to think outside the box.
Yeah.
Oh, gee, Willikers.
Oh boy.
Meanwhile, I guess that makes Nick and Catherine Scooby and Shaggy, because they're off on the
they're off on their own adventure.
On a side adventure. If only they had eaten a giant sandwich at some point
and had some Scooby snacks.
But I guess they had the scuba part of the Scooby Doo.
They did. But they definitely had the scuba part.
They're when they first show. So when they're in the other apartment, and then they think of the apartment manager, and he's in a TV cabinet in the corner, and they show his face, and he turns around, and I was like, that's when I went. I was I feel like this scene is saying to me, I would have got away with it if it weren't for those meddling kids.
Those meddling CSIs.
Yeah.
Love it.
But yeah, so I have to give.
I love the double meaning.
A little extra bonus point.
Yep.
This will probably come up in our bonus episode later on.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
The honorable mention for the best title.
Best title. Yep. So probably not going to be a favorite title, but next week we'll be back with... Actually, will we be back next week? Yes. I think we can record next week. It's going to be the next week following that I probably am not going to be able to record because of traveling plans. So we'll keep you updated, listeners, but we might be missing a week in the next few weeks due to both of us traveling and then me traveling even longer. So that's going to make recording very difficult. But next week, we will be back with Season 2, Episode 6, Alter Boys. In the meantime, you can find us on Facebook at Who Are You, a CSI podcast. You can also find us on Twitter/X, Instagram, and Threads at Who Are You, CSI pod. You can also email us at whoareyoucsipod@gmail.com. We love to hear from you guys, so feel free to reach out if you feel so inclined. And otherwise, we will talk to you next week.
No spoilers.
No spoilers.